Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, where we help new and beginning teachers navigate through those crazy first years of teaching so you can maintain your sanity and personal life. Here's your host, Kim Laprie.
Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. This is episode number 36, and I'm your host, Kim Laprie, and this is the podcast for new and beginning teachers who don't want to just survive those first few years, but actually thrive. I'm really excited about today's episode because I have a very special guest. But really quick, before I get to that, if you guys remember from last week's episode, I'm doing a feature on my podcast where I have some of my listeners call in on a Google Voice number and leave a voicemail for me answering some questions about why you love teaching. So if you haven't done that yet, there's still time, and I really want to get your story and your voice on the podcast. So please don't forget to do that. I've left the information in the show notes.
This is Gabriel Carrillo from the EdTech Bites podcast, a proud member of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you are listening to right now. The opinions expressed are those of each individual host. Make sure you check out all the other great podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com. And get ready, because the learning begins in 3, 2, 1.
So as I mentioned in the introduction, I have an awesome guest today, Angela Watson. And if you don't know Angela, she has been in the online and education space for over a decade, and she's been helping thousands and thousands of teachers across the country and the world. The reason that I asked Angela to come on the podcast is because she has been very helpful for me as a teacher in terms of my growth and how we've been able to streamline my processes and the way that I teach, but also because she has a lot of insight on how teachers, feel obligated to do certain things and to do everything, and how we feel judged or maybe judge other people. And she has a similar way of telling it like it is and being truthful about some of the things that we tiptoe around or some of the myths that we have around teaching. And I wanted you to get her perspective on all of this, but I also wanted her to talk about how she was able to help me with my teaching so that you guys can benefit from it as well. So here's my conversation with Angela. Angela, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Hey there, Kim. Thanks so much for having me.
Could you please tell them about your teaching experience and how you came to your current position?
Sure. So I was in the classroom for 11 years, and now I've been doing instructional coaching and educational consulting for the last 9 years. And when I first started teaching, I feel like educators had the opposite problem of the problem that they have now. So this was back in 1999, and we had no way to connect with each other and share ideas. We really didn't know what was happening in other people's schools. Mm-hmm. And so we were using these really primitive kind of message board forums. That was kind of the best we had. And you couldn't share photos or videos. I mean, we couldn't even take photos and videos. I remember my school had just gotten a digital camera that we all kind of shared. And I really wanted to be collaborating more with other teachers. And I realized there had to be a better way to do this. So, sharing these ideas in these message boards, and I felt like people were kind of asking the same questions over and over again. And I was kind of sharing the same information repeatedly. So I thought, let me try to learn how to code a little bit, see if I can build a website. And then I can just link to my website and I can start sharing, photos of things that are happening in my classroom and some of my ideas and materials and things like that. And I just loved it. It was so much fun, just sharing what worked for me, because I felt like I worked so hard to try to figure out things that it was a shame if I was the only one who was benefiting, or only the teachers, who taught at my same grade level in my school would benefit from all my hard work. So I really wanted to get those ideas out there, and things just really grew organically from there. The website just continues to grow. I've been maintaining it since 2003 all the way up through now. And since that time, I've done online courses as well. I've written 5 books. I do lots of speaking. and professional development. So it's just kind of grown organically based upon what teachers have said they wanted. I just try to really listen to teachers and figure out what the need is and then create solutions for them.
And I definitely think it helps other teachers, especially when they're starting out, to see what other teachers are doing, especially more veteran teachers, because when you come in, all you have with you is your student teaching experience. So that's one perspective. But the sharing of ideas and lessons, I think, has really helped teachers in the profession who have no clue, or they feel like they have no clue what's going on. So it sounds like you spearheaded that movement.
I feel like I was kind of one of the pioneers. Like it sounds crazy to think about it like that, but yeah, that was a really important time, and it was exciting to be part of it.
So then this means that as an instructional coach, you've worked with thousands of teachers. And I was wondering, what are some of the most common frustrations that you've heard from newer teachers?
I think all newer teachers feel like they're not good enough, that they're not doing a good enough job. They worry that they're doing things wrong. Like, how can this job be so incredibly exhausting and never ending? There has to be something I'm missing here. There has to be something that I'm not doing right, because there's no way that it's supposed to be this hard.
Right.
And I feel like we used to tell new teachers, like, oh, don't worry, the longer that you've been in the profession, the easier it's going to get for you. You'll start to find your groove. But I don't know that that's always true anymore, because I feel like so many veteran teachers are saying the same thing, because the standards keep changing, the curriculum, the technology, everything keeps changing so frequently. And so people are feeling like that new teacher, even when they've been doing this for a while. So I don't think the solution is to just sort of like muddle through that first year or two and just hope that things are going to get easier over time. They will get easier, but I think only marginally so. The solution really is to take charge of your experience in the profession and start analyzing what is the best use of your time and what's not, and really start looking at what needs to be on your plate and what doesn't. So question those school norms, question the status quo. And if the job of teaching is this overwhelming for everyone, then that means it's time to reinvent the job. It's time to draw boundaries around what we will and won't do, particularly when it comes to working so many hours for free.
That's a good point, especially you're right, it keeps changing. And I remember when Common Core came around, and I teach
Oh,
seventh
yes.
grade English, and we were freaking out. We're like, what is this? But the more we looked at it, the more we realized, wait a minute, at least at my school, in my district, we were already doing Common Core. So it
Mhm.
wasn't as scary as we thought. Now, on the other hand, if you're teaching NGSS, that's a whole nother ball game, because it's still in its infancy and people are still figuring out what it means and wrapping their brain around those standards. So I can imagine that for a science teacher, they're wondering, if it's a veteran science teacher, they're wondering, why do they have to change what they've been doing this whole time? And a newer teacher who might actually be sort of excited about it, but they still feel like, how am I going to borrow lessons from a veteran teacher if they don't even know how to make this work?
Yes. Oh, that's such a good point. Because when I was a new teacher, I leaned heavily on veteran teachers. And now it seems like even people with a lot of experience are really just trying to learn this thing too. I mean, like the analogy says, we're trying to build the plane while we're flying it. And if we're all kind of doing that at the same time, it's really hard to find people who might have the answers, because we're all really in the same boat trying to figure out everything at the same time.
Yeah, I appreciate the idea of, we're not just going to do the lecture style types of lessons anymore, and we're going to let students have a voice and choice in the classroom. But if you've been teaching a while and that's not how you teach, I can also see that as being overwhelming. And if there's pressure from your administration to completely revamp your teaching, that can be tough. And again, with the newer teachers, maybe their frame of reference is how they learned, which was the lecture style drill and kill lessons as well.
Hmm.
So it's tough for new teachers. For those of you listening, I'm sorry. We're here to help you. Um,
And you're not alone. You're not the only one who feels like this. There's nothing wrong with you. It is a really, really demanding job, and there's a lot of challenges. So please don't feel like, there's something that you're missing here. It is a really challenging profession, but you don't have to try to figure everything out on your own. There are people who can support you, and there's systems that you can put in place to make things easier.
Yes, lots of support. So you just need to find it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I mentor teachers, one aspect of teaching that creates the most stress is keeping track of all of the things that they think they need to do. So they lack these organizational systems, and I can definitely tell that they're struggling with prioritization. So, what are some strategies that a new teacher can implement in the second semester, since that's what's coming up at the time of this recording, that will help them tackle that?
I really like your emphasis on the word think, things that they think they have to do.
Mhm.
I think that's a big key here. We have to really get clear on what actually has to be done and what is just something that someone mentioned to you in passing. What's a nice to do? What's a norm in your school? That's very different from what is actually required and what's truly necessary for kids. So, one of the things that I would recommend is to find a colleague that you can trust and go to that person when you're overwhelmed and say, look, I've got 10 things on this to-do list for today. Which of these absolutely have to get done? Tell me, what are the principal's pet peeves? What are the things that if I don't do, this is going to put me on his or her radar for sure, and that's going to get me in big trouble? Like, what are the things that I need to know about for sure? What are the things that people are actually following up on and checking to make sure that I'm doing? And what are the things here that I can have a little bit of leeway on? Because everything is not urgent and important, even though it feels that way. And you can't do everything well as a new teacher.
Right.
No one's going to tell you that. No one's going to tell you, oh, go ahead and cut corners in this area. They're just going to say, you need to do all these things. They all need to be done simultaneously. They're all important. Go figure it out. And that's not possible. So learning how to prioritize and figure out what is most important is key. And you can get advice from someone that you trust on this. You don't have to, put yourself out there in front of the whole staff and let everyone know you're floundering, but find that one teacher who you trust, who you admire and respect their teaching and their approach to their work, and get that person to sort of level with you about what are the things that really matter and what don't. And I'll tell you something, veteran teachers love doing that. Like showing someone the ropes like that, like,
Mhm.
oh, you don't have to worry about that. That's not a big deal. Like, that's fun for an experienced teacher to say. So you're not burdening people. A lot of times new teachers feel like, oh, I don't want to burden them. Listen, if you're asking a veteran teacher, what's the stuff I really have to do? And what's the stuff that is just like, things that I'm pressuring myself to do in my head, they're going to be really happy to tell you.
Right. That's true, because they love to tell you the secrets and the tips and the shortcuts, and they feel like you're
Yes.
becoming an insider now that they've shared that with you.
That's right. Exactly. It's very different from going and being like, I don't know how to plan a lesson. Show me how to plan. Well, now you're putting a lot of work on that person. I understand that, you may be reluctant to ask for help for something like that, but just like, does this thing really have to be done? People will tell you that. And, a lot of what you're seeing around you and what you're seeing other people do, well, they're doing that because they're experienced. They have built up years of getting this job, more streamlined. So they are able to do a little bit more than what you may be able to do as a new teacher. So if they're all changing out their bulletin boards every single month, that doesn't mean that you necessarily have to do that. Ask them, hey, is that just something that you guys do because it's something that you enjoy and something you like to do? Or is that something that I'm going to get in trouble if I don't do it? Like, someone's going to come around and actually check and make sure that I have new student work up, every month or every 6 weeks. How often do I really need to get this done?
Right.
So you get clear on that. What is actually expected of you, and focus on doing those things. And you can improve in other areas over time. But don't buy into this mindset that you're going to be able to do all the same things that the teacher across the hall who's been doing this for 10 years is able to do. Give yourself some grace and don't stress out because, there's just more and more demands coming at you. You're just one person. You cannot do better than your best. So figure out what's really important and, let yourself improve on the other areas over time.
And find out ways that you can get help too. So if they are changing out their bulletin boards, are they having a parent help them? Are they having students help them? It's not necessarily that teacher who's doing all of the work themselves. I also know that I had someone I was mentoring, and we had this curriculum that we were teaching, and she was doing every single worksheet, every single step. And she's like, I can't get through all of this. And then, I had to tell her, you know what, actually, that particular lesson, we just sort of mentioned it because they get it pretty quickly, and we sort of combine it with this other lesson. She's like, oh, okay. So like you mentioned, it's those little shortcuts. Do I have to do everything here? Do I have to follow everything to a T, or can I just use my professional judgment based on my students' needs?
That's right. And I'm glad you brought up professional judgment, because that can be tricky for new teachers too, because you don't feel like you have it
Oh,
yet.
true.
You feel like, how do I even really know what I'm doing? But the thing is, like, you learn through experimentation, right?
Mhm.
And if you make a mistake one time in the sense that like it doesn't work, that was really important feedback for you. So I think learning to trust your intuition is really important, to say, my gut is telling me that this will work, and go with it, evaluate, see how it's going. And then if it doesn't, then, try something new next time. But don't fall into this trap where, you're always looking to someone else to tell you if you're doing things right or
Oh, good
wrong,
point.
because teaching is, partly a science, but it's also partly an art. And you will not ever do things the exact same way as someone else. So much of your personality and who you are as a person shines through in the classroom. And so learning to figure out what works for you and what makes sense for you is a really, really important skill. So, don't assume that just because you've only been at this for, 6 months, that you can't trust yourself. You are a professional. You were hired because they trusted you to be alone in this classroom
Yeah.
with these kids and be in charge of their learning. Like you're not you're not a teenager anymore. You are a grown up. You are a professional. You got a degree, or you got some sort of training to be there. And step into that power and start making some decisions for yourself too. Don't doubt yourself too much.
I completely agree. So for those of you listening, and you're all new teachers, don't second guess yourself. You need to trust yourself. Now, something that I remember when I started out teaching, I heard teachers sort of on two different camps on my next question for you in terms of taking work home. So there was the camp of I refuse to take anything home, and I leave exactly when the bell rings and when the students leave. And then there's the other side of I can't imagine not taking anything home because I'm going to get anxiety if I don't get things done. And I'm just curious where you stand on that.
There's no one right way to teach. And therefore, I think that there's no one right way to manage the workload
Mhm.
of a teacher. I think you really have to do what works for you. And when you mention there that the person who is actually going to feel anxiety if they feel like they have all these things hanging over your head, well, that's part of your personality. That's part of your approach to your work. And sure, you can, there are things that you can do to kind of take some of that pressure and stress off of yourself. But if you know it's your personality to want to get things done, then that's okay. You can go with that. I think sort of letting go of this binary is very freeing, where you don't have to choose a camp where you are either or.
Mhm.
So maybe you're new to your position and you bring a lot of work home. Maybe in a different season of life, you draw tighter boundaries. Maybe it's different from day to day or week to week. I'm never going to shame a teacher for bringing work home. You do what you have to do. But I also want to remove the stigma from teachers who don't bring work home, because we can't judge whether someone is doing an effective job based on how many hours they work. And when you can free yourself from the belief that hours worked equates with your effectiveness, in other words, working more hours somehow proves that you care more, that you're doing a better job.
Right.
Once you can free yourself of that belief, then you can start making some intentional decisions about how to spend your time. So you're no longer working from this idea that teachers have to take work home or feeling guilty about leaving before your coworkers. You're able to look at what tasks really need to be done and then determine when and how much you work according to that, and not just according to the norms that you're seeing around you.
This is a good point because there's people who rush to the staff parking lot to go home. And I'm one of those people. And it's not because I don't do any work. I actually bring my work home because I feel that I can set myself in my office and I can really concentrate. There aren't any distractions from teachers stopping by my room. But I'm sure it appears like I don't do any work, and I do bring some work home. But I also don't begrudge someone who wants to stay later and grade so that when they do go home, they can put their feet up, have a glass of wine, and not have to worry about school anymore. So you're right. It is a bit of also like what's best for you, and who cares about the perception of what others are thinking in terms of whether or not you're taking your work home.
Yeah. And that's hard to let go of, particularly when you're new, because you're still kind of, trying to earn your reputation in the school and you want people to know that you're doing a good job and that you're dedicated. But, just because someone's staying in the school building till 6 doesn't mean that they're actually working.
Good point.
A lot of the teachers that I know who stayed that long, like they were in there, they're like, heating up a meal and then they're, checking their social media, then they're on their phone with their spouse for 20 minutes. Like, you could have gone home.
Yeah, exactly.
Like let's not play here. Like you were actually working for 3 hours straight after school. There was a good deal of personal time in there too. And that's your choice.
Right.
But that, I think we see the cars in the parking lot. We're like, oh my gosh, they're working so much harder than I am. And they also might not be working on the right things. If they're in there, fiddling around with, something that doesn't really need to be done or reworking, something that was already fine, just, maybe in there figuring out some kind of like craft activity to do with kids that's very time consuming, cutting out laminating, who knows what they're in there doing.
Right.
If you are just staying for half an hour, but you're planning this really dynamic lesson that's really going to move the needle for your kids the next day and then you go home, well, that may be a better use of time for you. So hours work does not equate with effectiveness. So don't buy into that myth and really be aware of that tendency that teachers have to judge one another based on who leaves when. It's a really unhealthy mentality. I guess it doesn't just happen in the teaching profession too. There's, I think in the corporate world, that's also a judgment. I hear of people saying, they feel like they don't want to be the first one to leave the office. And it's a really unhealthy mentality.
And I think there's also something to be said about, mental health. Like I need to go home.
Yes.
I need to stop working. I've already been working this entire day and giving 200% of myself to these students. It's time.
That's right. And then there's no point in staying if you're too exhausted to do anything and you're not able to concentrate. Go home, rest, pick it up later.
Yeah. Now, again, at the time of this recording, it's in December and we're about to go on break, but second semester comes up pretty soon and there is a lot of hiring during this time. So if a new teacher is starting out brand new next semester, what are some tips for fast tracking their preparation and feeling like they kind of have it together on day one?
I think if you were to ask 100 different teachers this, you would get 100 different answers. And because of that, overwhelming amount of advice can lead new teachers right back to this place of overwhelm, where there's all these things I need to be doing. They're all super important and everybody's telling me I need to focus on something else. So my advice is to figure out what is important to you in order to feel like you have it together. So is an organized environment really important to you? Maybe you're the type of person who feels like you can't work if things are messy or cluttered around you. If that's the case, then really focus on getting that classroom set up the way that you need it to be. Work those extra hours to set up places for all your different types of paper, get the student materials organized, and have things be manageable to you so that you're not struggling in this, cluttered environment that's going to be really hard for you. Or maybe for you, what's really key to feeling like you have things together is having a really good rapport with students. You need to really understand the kids in your classroom to feel like you have it together. So in that case, focus on the interactions with the kids. Notice what works, notice what doesn't. Pay really close attention to school culture, to your demographics, really get to know who it is that you're teaching, what feels right to you in that context and what feels, inauthentic. So maybe really focusing on that part. Or maybe for you, it's about really having engaging lessons. You want your day to run super smoothly and you want to do some really interesting things with students. So then expend more energy into that piece. And obviously, all of these things are important. All of these things are great. But you can't do them all to an outstanding level when you're brand new. Mm-hmm. So think about what is going to make you feel like you have it together and give that area just a little bit more attention. Give yourself permission to focus on those other things more later because you're not going to do all of them also like your first month. It's just not going to happen. So you don't have to let other people set the goals for you or define success for you. Everyone's going to have their opinions about what you need to be doing. But your satisfaction in your own job really matters too. So think about what makes you feel like you're on top of things and attend to that instead of just pushing your needs to the side and trying to keep up with all the things that everyone else expects you to do.
That brings up a point for me when I was switching over to English because previously I had taught band And I switched to English about 7 years ago. And I really felt like I had to do all the things. I had to have the amazing classroom with all the bins. And it's funny, I went out and bought all the bins and I never used them because I just thought that that
Mm.
was what was expected of me. And I really had a hard time with organizing and prioritizing that I can imagine, the same way that new teachers are. So around 2016, I stumbled upon something online. It was this program, and it's one that you created, the 40-hour Teacher Workweek Club. And, I want to tell you that it really reframed the way that I thought about teaching. I thought about organization, and it sort of like gave me this ability to take a really big, deep breath and just let it out and feel good. And, that was my 14th year of teaching too, when I took that. And I couldn't believe that something could be so pivotal in my career that late in the game. So I really want to share this with my listeners because I know that they're going to get so much value out of it. So could you tell them more about the program?
Sure. So the goal is to do really the things that we've been talking about here today, to be really intentional with your time. And that's all of your time, your instructional time, your contractual time, and your personal time too. And the goal when you're being really intentional like that is to trim some hours off of your work week. These 70-hour weeks that are the norm in the profession just really aren't sustainable. So through the program, I help teachers shave on average 11 hours off of their work week. So the average person is working around 62 hours when they start, and they get down to 51 by the time they finish the program. So that's a savings of about 500 hours a year.
Hmm.
And when you think about that over the course of your teaching career, I mean, it's just thousands and thousands of hours. You're really sort of taking your life back.
Right.
And for me, that's the goal that I want for teachers, is to feel like, you know, teachers love what they do and they want to keep doing it for many years to come. But that's not possible unless you can find a way to make it work within your life. And it's such an individual process that it can take a lot of trial and error to figure it out. So that's my hope for the 40-hour Teacher Workweek Club, is that it cuts out some of that trial and error so that you're not just trying to figure out things on your own, but you can actually go with some proven systems and tweak them a little bit for what works for your personality.
And you don't have to spend 14 years of trial and error trying to get it together. You could spend one school year and shave all that time off. Especially when I first had my child, it would have been amazing to have known the techniques that you cover in, in the program, because I was trying to do it all and some things would slide and I would feel the guilt and I would feel the anxiety. But the way that you set it up, if something did slide, I no longer felt guilty about it, or I set it up so that it wouldn't slide. So,
Mhm.
and with that, could you discuss the different topics that you cover each month? Because it is a year-long program.
It is. And I felt like when I was creating that, I was thinking, this is like, that's a lot. Like, that's a lot of material. Who wants to take like a year-long course? That sounds awful, especially when you have no time. But as you said, you don't have to do everything. You don't have to keep up. You have access to everything, for the rest of your teaching career. You can always go back. But I wanted it to be a year-long program because I feel like what you need in August is very different from what you need in January,
Hmm.
which is very different from what you need in April. And I really tried to think about the timing. What are the things that teachers really struggle with at each point in the school year, and how can we streamline each one? So, there's time for us to focus on really automating classroom systems so that you're not responsible for figuring out everything yourself and keeping all these plates spinning all day long. How can you turn the responsibility for keeping the classroom running smoothly over to your students so that they're in charge of a lot of these things and you're not trying to mentally remember, okay, this person's supposed to be here, this person needs to be there, now this person needs to get out the materials. Like, how can we turn that over to them? So really getting things automated, I think, is a big push in the fall. And then we start moving this time of year more into things like lesson planning and grading and tweaking parent communication systems. What's not working so far and how can we try something new? And that's kind of the cool thing about this time of year, is you have this rapport with your kids already. And so it's a great time to experiment. You can say, well, I've been trying to use this tool in my classroom, the kids really aren't responding to it very well, or they're not responding that well anymore. Like they did it first and now it's not working, because we all know that's how things go. A lot of times in the classroom, you think you found the perfect solution and then it stops. It stops being effective. So it's a perfect time of year to be like, okay, these kids know me, I know them. Let's try something new, and really start thinking about, what is the ideal system here for my classroom, and that way you can really hit the ground running in the following school year.
So, considering that teachers are strapped for time already, how have you found that other, the people who go through your program have been able to fit this all into their current schedule?
That's always the biggest thing. The people who make time for it get results. The people who don't, like, if you don't ever use the materials, I can't help you. And this is definitely the hardest thing is this whole prioritization thing. So the ones who really make time for it have found ways to work it into their existing routines. So all the content is in like a PDF form that you can skim over, but it's also an audio form. And I think that's the best. As you can tell, I love, I love podcasting. I love creating audio content. So it's very conversational, just like we're doing right now. And I mean, if you get stuck in a traffic jam, you can listen to the whole month's worth of content, in that one sitting. It's really not that much. So a lot of people just listen to it in the car. So it really takes no extra time for them. Some people batch it and they do the whole month at once. So they wait until, all the materials have been released for that month and that topic. And then they just do a deep dive one day, set aside, it could be a half hour, it could be an hour, depending on, if you want to really like read word for word, or if you want to just sort of skim over and look for things. I've tried to organize it in a way where you can skip around, just sort of scan it, the document, and see, what's something that you're really struggling with. And as I mentioned, you can skip weeks and come back later. So you can say, I don't really need that right now. And, come back to it when you do. So you just kind of pick and choose the things that matter to you. And our motto is small changes add up to big results.
Right.
So you're not making these huge shifts. You're not doing everything at once. You don't have to do a lot of stuff. Really small things can make a huge difference.
And what I noticed when I was going through the program, it was nice to start out in the beginning of the year, but I can imagine that if you're a first year teacher, that beginning of the year is already so overwhelming that it's difficult to, plan out your classroom plus do the program as much as right now. So by now, your students, you have some systems in place. So you have a little bit of room mentally, I would imagine, to do the program so that you can refine where you're going from now. You can refine what you have and make it better. I think if you don't even know the students yet, it could be a little bit more difficult too, if we're talking about homework and parents. And I don't know, I just think now is a great time to implement this because it's a little more relaxed second semester compared to that beginning of the year feeling.
Yes, I agree. I love the January start. The club is open twice a year. It's open usually July-ish. It's like a summer start in January. And I love the January for all of those reasons that you just shared. I just think, most people still have 5 to 6 months left, and you don't want to just muddle through and just say, basically, I'm just going to suffer through, and then hopefully things will be better next year. Hopefully I'll find time over my summer break because, everyone knows teachers have such long, carefree summer breaks with nothing to do at all.
Nope.
Surely I'll make time to sit down and learn a new system for teaching over the summer.
Nope.
If you can put off the results that you want. But the truth is, you don't have to be exhausted and miserable from now until June. You don't have to just live for the breaks. There's ways that you can start streamlining now. And, if you're unhappy with something in your life or in your teaching, it's never too late to create change. It's never the wrong time to jump in and start experimenting and finding new ways that work for you. Don't just write off the rest of the school year and be like, I don't want to confuse the kids. I don't want to change anything. I don't want to do anything new. In August, you are going to be trying to do so many new things.
Yes.
There's so much newness in August. You don't need anything else new in August.
Right.
So, don't settle for less than what you deserve and what your students deserve. You deserve to be happy and enjoy your life. So, if that's a result that you want, I encourage you, whether you join the program or not, I encourage you to, go back after the holidays and start trying some new things in your classroom and, bring that enjoyment back to your teaching, it's easy to lose your vision. Even when you're new, it's easy to lose your vision. Like, why did I get into this in the first
Oh,
place?
yeah.
Like I wanted to make a difference, but like, what am I actually doing with my life right now? So really kind of, simplifying, let's streamline, let's cut back and focus on what really matters.
And that's actually a sentiment that a lot of new teachers have this time of year. They're like, why did I go into teaching again? Because I'm
Mhm.
exhausted. I'm disillusioned about it all. I don't feel like I'm right for the job. And you just need support and some reframing. And I think that the program is perfect for reframing and the support. I mean, the Facebook groups are amazing. There's so much support in there from new and veteran teachers. And what I love about the way that you have it split up is there's a topic per month, and then you break those topics down into weeks, into little subtopics with materials. And what's great about that is you can just focus on adjusting or making a small change, like you had mentioned, per month. So we're not saying completely overall, like not overall, you don't have to overhaul your homework policies, right away. You could just
That's
tweak
right.
one thing, or how you do parent communication. You don't have to change everything. It's just little small tweaks. And I also found when I was in the program that the second year I actually did better. So
Mm-hmm.
after I kind of had all of it in my mind and I was making these small changes along the way, then the second year I was able to really reflect on the changes that I did make. And then, okay, so do I want to go big now that I've tried it,
Yes.
so it's amazing. It's not just a 1 year thing and you're done. It's actually something that's ongoing, and it's always good to be reflective anyway.
I've heard that a lot about the second year. Once the second year starts, people, like the people who joined last January now, when this January rolls around, I'll hear a lot of comments like, whoa, I'm doing so much better than I thought I was. Like, I had no idea. Like, I'm starting to realize like all these little things are really making a difference. And you start to notice, as you said, like you can kind of go big at that point. Like all the seeds have been planted and now you're ready to really run with it. And that's exciting too.
hmm Now, I know that you've updated it since I've joined. It's been 3 years. So, what kind of materials can my listeners expect if they join the program?
So we do go through and update the links and the resources each month and make sure that things are current. And we've added some resources for things like flexible seating and project-based learning, Genius Hour, that sort of thing. But I think in general, the content is fairly evergreen. It's not about teaching trends and it's not really about the latest practices. The core of it is about you. It's about your mindset and your habits. And the principles of the club are always going to be the same. The idea is that you're learning how to view your work through a new lens. So you're learning how to focus on the best and highest use of your time and your students' time. So that as the profession evolves, we know it's going to keep changing rapidly. That way you're prepared to adapt to all the changes and you won't be thrown off by them because you know how to see your teaching. And that's also why the club is not tied to any particular curriculum or standard. It's for K-12 teachers, all subject areas, which sounds impossible. People don't believe it until they see it.
Right.
But it's true because it's about you. It's about you. And you can take these materials with you for the rest of your teaching career, no matter what or where you teach. If you're teaching, ninth grade right now, ninth grade social studies or something, and then you get moved to fifth grade in the future, you'll be able to use these same principles because it's really about a lens through which you view your work.
Right. And it's the method.
Mm-hmm.
It's the methods that you pick up in terms of of organization, thinking about homework, thinking about parent. It's not something that's specific, to, like you said, to a greater subject, which I thought was awesome because then I found that in the groups that we would sort of, well, first of all, I was in a secondary Facebook group. And so then we were able to help each other and collaborate and give each other materials that way. So that really helped.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I know that you have a promotion going on for this month for the program. Could you give us a little more information about that?
Yes. So the club is open to new members now through January 10th, 2019. And you can get the early bird pricing before the new year. So by December 31st. So this is the only chance to join before summer. And as we mentioned, I really think the January start is ideal because it gives you that chance to experiment and make sure you can really hit the ground running next fall. But if you happen to be listening to this later, the next chance to join will be over the summer. And if you go to the link that Kim gives you, there'll be a place where you can learn about the next dates, and you can sign up to be notified when you can join if you happen to miss this window.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. I appreciate that. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about this program. You guys, those of you listening, I swear it's amazing. I will vouch for it. And if you have any questions about the program, please feel free to email me at kim@teachersneedteachers.com, and I can tell you from my firsthand experience about what you can expect and how it changed the way that I taught. Angela, if my listeners want to reach out to you, how can they get a hold of you?
So you can go to my website. It's thecornerstoneforteachers.com. The other thing that your listeners might want to do is check out my podcast. Obviously, they are podcast fans and they like consuming content this way. So my podcast is called Truth for Teachers, and you can look that up in your favorite podcast player app. And I'll have some new episodes coming out again beginning in January.
Awesome. And then are you on social media as well?
I am. You can find me on Instagram. I love Twitter. I love. I'm on Facebook as well. I think that's it.
Okay. And I'll put those links in the show notes for you guys if you want to reach out to Angela. So Angela, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kim.
Okay, you guys. Was that awesome? I told you she was awesome. And I'm really, really excited about the program opening in January. And that's also one of the reasons why I wanted Angela on here. Now, I'm not kidding when I say that I really benefited from the program. And so I'm not just trying to sell you something here. It really changed a lot for me. And I feel that because you guys are new, if you can get a hold of this program sooner, then it will really help you frame all the things that you feel you need to do and help you get past that sense of overwhelm sooner. Does it mean you're never going to be overwhelmed? No, absolutely not. But I think we need to sometimes get past of all the shoulds, just like I mentioned in my last episode, the things that we think that we should do. But how about let's focus on the things that have to get done now, that are urgent, and then prioritize. And the program really helps you prioritize and rethink about all the different parts that go into teaching. So what you want to do is you want to head over to 40htw.com. That stands for 40-hour teacher workweek. So 40htw.com. And when you go there, you're going to be able to see some information about the program. There's a lot of stuff on there that talks about how the program works. It talks about the different topics that are covered every single month. And as Angela had mentioned, if you sign up now before January, so up until, December 31st, then you get early bird pricing. And what I love is that Angela has also created a payment program so that you don't have to pay for it all at once. And I can tell you that it is money well spent. Yes, we're strapped for cash those first few years of teaching, or actually always, but especially, the first few years of teaching. But the investment in yourself, in your sanity, and the amount of time that you can spend with your family and your friends because you're taking back that time. I mean, she mentioned 11 hours saved by the end of the program. Just imagine that 11 hours a week. You can take care of yourself. You can spend more time with your family and kids. You can, focus on self-care or focus on your health and fitness. So it's definitely well worth it. And when you go there and you click on Join Now, there's a place there that's going to ask you how you heard about the club. And if you could please put in there Kim Lepre, Lepre, or kim@teachersneedteachers.com, I would truly appreciate that. And just remember, I totally vouch for this program. And if during the program you also want to email me and ask me questions about what you're working on for that particular month, please feel free to do that. I would love to help you get through the materials and work through all of it so that you can make the most out of it for your particular situation. Maybe you're thinking that now isn't a good time, that you'd rather do the summer start, and that's fine too. But I will say that starting now is actually a better time. As I mentioned in my conversation with Angela, one of the reasons why it's better is because you already know your students. You have gotten your feet wet already. You've already tried out some systems. You've tried out, different classroom procedures and organizational systems. And now is a good time for you to sort of reflect and refine, especially since you don't have to worry about getting to know the students anymore, about first day of school, first week of school, first month of school. Now you can just focus on refining and improving and taking back that time. So again, I encourage you to take a look at the club. And if you do join it at any point in the year, again, just go ahead and mention that you were referred by me, Kim Lepre. So thank you again for taking the time to hang out with me today. I really appreciate you taking what little time that you have, whether it be on your commute to work or while you're getting ready. Don't forget that you can leave a message of Google voicemail telling me about your story and why you love teaching. I'd really love that. And I hope that you have a fabulous holiday. You have a fabulous break, and I will talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast. Love this episode? Head over to Apple Podcast or Google Play to subscribe, rate, and leave a review.